Pain was the first thing he noticed, not the sharp kind that comes from injury, but the dull ache of muscles that had not yet remembered how to move. The world returned slowly, sound first, then smell, then light. Birds, wind through trees, and the faint scent of smoke from a dying fire. His eyes opened. Dark wooden beams crossed the ceiling above him, worn smooth with age and smoke. Morning light slipped between them in thin golden lines. He stared upward, waiting. Memories should have followed. They didn't. He sat up slowly. The blanket sliding off him was thick wool. The room around him was simple. Stone walls, a wooden table, and a kettle resting over fading embers. Nothing looked familiar. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. His body felt strange, younger, stronger. He flexed his fingers. Okay, he muttered. No memories. That's not ideal. He rubbed his face. I'm sure that's normal. Then a voice spoke, very close. Good, you're awake. He froze, slowly, very slowly. He turned his head. A tiny glowing woman floated in the air in front of him. She was barely the size of his hand. Her form shimmered faintly blue like moonlight on water. She studied him calmly. He stared. She stared back. 3 seconds passed. Then he yelled, What is that? He jumped backward, tripped over the bed frame, and nearly fell. The glowing woman calmly drifted aside. Your reaction suggests surprise. Of course it does. He scrambled away from the bed. You're floating. Yes. You're glowing. Yes. You're tiny. Yes. He pointed at her. Explain. She tilted her head thoughtfully. I do not yet possess sufficient information to explain. He blinked. You don't know why you're floating? No. You don't know why you're glowing? No. You don't know why you're that size? No. He rubbed his face. This is not happening. You appear distressed. I am distressed. My name is Nova. He stared. You remember your name? Yes. I don't remember mine. That appears to be correct. That seems unfair. Nova considered this. Yes, he sighed. Great. Nova glanced toward the door. There are 9 other humans outside. He blinked. What? They appear to be attempting to strike each other with sticks. What? They may be training. He looked at the door, then back at her. Honestly, I'm not sure which part of this day is the strangest. Nova floated beside him. Observation is important. He walked toward the door cautiously. If I open this door and find more glowing floating people, I'm blaming you. That seems unlikely. Why? Because I would also be surprised. That's not comforting. He grabbed the door handle, took a breath, then opened the door. Sunlight flooded the room. Nooradu Valley stretched before him in rolling green hills. A silver river cut through the basin like a ribbon of light. Mountains surrounded the valley like ancient walls. Beyond the river rose a forest so vast and dark it seemed older than the mountains themselves. For a moment Enkidu simply stared. The world felt enormous, alive, real. Then Nova spoke. You appear to be missing clothing. He blinked. What? He looked down, then immediately slammed the door shut. Oh no! Nova hovered beside him. You are completely... I know! Outside someone laughed, loudly. Oh no! He grabbed the blanket from the bed and wrapped it around himself quickly. There. Nova nodded. That appears socially appropriate. I hope so. He opened the door again, this time carefully. 9 teenagers were staring directly at him. One still held a spear mid-swing. Another lowered a wooden sword slowly. A girl near the front had her hand over her mouth trying not to laugh. The dark-haired girl stepped forward first. She studied him calmly and then smiled. Well, she said, that was an introduction. Enkidu rubbed the back of his neck. I can explain. Please do. I woke up. She nodded. In a blanket? No, that part happened later. Behind her, someone snorted. Best entrance we've ever had. Another voice added, most people start with hello. She rolled her eyes. Ignore them. She extended her hand. I'm Celine. I don't know my name. She raised an eyebrow. That seems inconvenient. It is. A boy stepped beside her. Same eyes and same dark hair. Less patience. Why are you talking to him? Celine sighed. Soren. What? He just woke up. Soren looked Enkidu up and down. Right. Behind them, someone whispered loudly. Pretty sure he woke all the way up. Laughter broke out. Kale, Celine said flatly. What? You're not helping. I'm helping the story. Nova floated beside Enkidu. These humans are amused. Yes, Enkidu muttered. I noticed. A shadow fell across the clearing. The laughter stopped. The Magus approached. Silver hair, simple robes, calm authority. He studied the boy wrapped in a blanket. So, he said, you are awake? I think so. The Magus looked at him carefully, then spoke one word. Enkidu. The name settled inside him like something long forgotten returning home. That's my name? Yes. Celine, the Magus said. Yes? Take him to the storage room. She nodded. Come on, blanket warrior. That name cannot stick. Oh, it's sticking. The others laughed. Minutes later, Enkidu returned wearing a simple tunic and boots. Kyle grinned. Look, he found clothes. Celine shook her head. This is never going away. Enkidu sighed. I figured. The Magus turned toward the towering trees. Today we train. He pointed toward the forest. The outer Desp forest. The children gathered their weapons. Pairs formed naturally. Soren and Rethan moved ahead as scouts. Kyle and Kesh carried spears. Thalen and Dagan lifted shields. Liara and Mira prepared healing kits. Celine looked at Enkidu. You're with me. That seems reasonable. Nova hovered beside him. This environment contains many life forms. Please don't narrate them all. No promises. The edge of the forest felt like a boundary between two worlds. Behind them lay the open valley, rolling green fields, the silver ribbon of the Lantern River, and the quiet stone buildings of Nuridu. Ahead of them stood Desp Forest. The trees rose like ancient pillars, their trunks thick and dark, their branches woven together high above the ground. Sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor, slipping through the canopy in narrow beams. The air changed the moment they stepped beneath the first branches. Cooler, damp, alive. Leaves shifted softly under their boots. Enkidu walked beside Celine, gripping the spear she had given him earlier. The weapon was simple but well made. Bronze tip, ashwood shaft, perfectly balanced. Magus craftsmanship, Celine said when she noticed him studying it. It feels good. It should, she replied. They're built to last. Ahead of them, two boys moved through the trees almost silently. Soren and Rethan, Celine said quietly. Scouts. Enkidu watched them disappear briefly behind a cluster of ferns before reappearing again. They move like ghosts. They've been doing it since they were little. Nova floated beside Enkidu's shoulder, examining the forest with intense curiosity. This ecosystem contains a high density of predators. Enkidu nodded slightly. Good to know. Celine glanced sideways at him. Good to know what? Enkidu blinked. Nothing. Kyle laughed from behind them. He's doing it again. Doing what? Enkidu asked, talking to himself. I'm thinking out loud. Kesh grinned. Sure you are. Nova tilted her head. Your explanation did not convince them. Enkidu muttered under his breath. Please stop helping. Celine looked over again. You all right? Perfectly fine. Cal smirked. Forrest hasn't even tried to eat him yet, and he's already arguing with himself. Nova drifted forward slightly. I am not arguing. Enkidu sighed quietly. Shh. Celine stopped walking. Did you just shush yourself? Focus, Enkidu said quickly. That's what I meant. She stared at him for a moment, then shook her head. Strange. Ahead of them, Soren suddenly raised a hand. The group froze instantly. Rethan crouched beside him, studying the ground. Tracks, he whispered. Celine stepped forward. What kind? Wolves. How many? Kyle asked eagerly. Rathan traced the marks in the dirt. 3, maybe 4. Kyle grinned. Finally. Celine sighed. You enjoy this far too much. Kyle lowered his spear. That's because it's fun. Nova drifted closer to the tracks. These animals appear territorial. Enkidu nodded. Yeah. Celine glanced at him again. Yeah, what? The wolves. What about them? They're territorial. Celine blinked once. That's generally how wolves work. Kyle snorted. He's definitely talking to himself. Enkidu rubbed the back of his neck. Just thinking. Nova folded her tiny arms. They are not wrong. The bushes ahead rustled. Then the first wolf stepped into the clearing. Ash-gray fur, lean body, yellow eyes watching the group carefully. Another appeared behind it, then a third. The wolves spread out slowly, circling. Celine lowered her stance. They're testing us. Kale stepped forward eagerly. Let them. Positions, Celine said. The group moved immediately. Thalon and Dagon stepped forward, raising their shields. Kale and Kesh lowered their spears beside them. Soren and Rathan shifted to the flanks. Liara and Mira moved behind the line. Selene glanced at Enkidu. Stay close. Good plan. Nova studied the wolves carefully. Their muscle tension suggests imminent attack. Thanks, Enkidu muttered. Selene looked over again. Talking to yourself during a fight is a bad habit. Working on it. The first wolf lunged. Thalen's shield slammed forward with a heavy crack as the animal struck it. Kale's spear shot forward. The wolf twisted aside just in time. Fast! Cal shouted. Another wolf darted toward Mira. Before it reached her, Soren's spear drove sideways, forcing the animal back. Not down. Rathan lunged forward and struck with the butt of his spear, pushing it off balance. Celine moved like lightning. Her blade flashed once. The wolf yelped and staggered. Now! She shouted. Kyle and Kesh thrust together. Their spears struck cleanly. The wolf collapsed. The remaining animals backed away. Low growls filled the clearing. Nova drifted upward suddenly. Additional organism approaching. Enkidu tightened his grip on the spear. Where? Celine frowned. Where what? A vine exploded from the fallen log beside them. The thorncrawler lashed toward Dagon. Dagon swung his hammer hard. The vine cracked against the weapon and recoiled. Behind! Celine shouted. Enkidu reacted instinctively. His spear drove forward just as the vine struck again. The bronze tip pierced the creature's twisting body. The thorncrawler shrieked. Dagon crushed it with a second blow. The remaining wolves hesitated, then retreated into the forest. Silence returned slowly. Everyone stood still, breathing hard. Kyle broke the quiet first. That, he said with a grin, was fun. Celine wiped her blade. That was messy. Still fun. Nova studied the fallen creatures carefully. These animals defended their territory. Enkidu nodded. Yeah, they did. Selene looked at him. Of course they did. Enkidu blinked. Yes. Kyle laughed. He's doing it again. Mira tilted her head. Talking to himself? Constantly, Kesh said. Enkidu sighed. I'm thinking. Nova tilted her head slightly. Your companions appear concerned about your mental stability. Enkidu muttered quietly. I'm starting to understand why. Celine sheathed her blade. Enough talking. She pointed deeper into the forest. We're only getting started. Ahead of them, the dark trees of Desp Forest stretched endlessly, and somewhere within them, more creatures waited. The forest closed around them again as they continued forward. The clearing where the wolves had attacked faded behind them quickly, swallowed by thick brush and towering trunks. Sunlight barely touched the ground here. Everything smelled of damp soil and old leaves. Soren moved ahead again, silent as drifting smoke. Rathan followed slightly to the side, scanning the ground and tree trunks with practiced focus. The rest of the group moved in a loose formation behind them. Enkidu walked beside Selene, adjusting his grip on the spear. After a moment, he glanced around the trees. This place feels different. Selene nodded. It should. Why? We're deeper now. Nova drifted slowly around Enkidu, examining the forest floor. The density of life has increased. Enkidu nodded slightly. Good to know. Celine glanced at him again. You keep saying that. Saying what? Good to know. It seems appropriate. Cal laughed from behind them. He's definitely talking to himself. I'm thinking, Enkidu said. Kesh smirked. You're thinking out loud. That helps. Nova tilted her head. Your companions appear amused by your behavior. I noticed. Liara smiled faintly. As long as he fights well, he can talk to himself all he wants. Mira nodded enthusiastically. I talk to plants sometimes. Everyone stopped and looked at her. What? She asked. Kyle shrugged. That explains a lot. Celine shook her head and kept walking. Focus. The ground began to slope slightly downward as they moved deeper into the forest. The air grew heavier. Rethan suddenly raised a hand. The group froze again. He crouched low, brushing leaves aside carefully. Soren joined him, scanning the surrounding trees. What is it? Celine asked quietly. Rethan pointed at the disturbed earth. Boars? Cal grinned. Now we're talking. Celine gave him a look. Wild boars are not wolves. I know. They're meaner. Kyle's grin widened. Even better. Nova floated closer to the tracks. These creatures possess heavier mass and stronger muscle density. Enkidu nodded thoughtfully. Great. Celine glanced at him. Great what? Nothing. Soren's voice cut through the clearing. They're close. A low snorting sound echoed through the trees. Branches snapped. The first ironback boar burst through the brush. The creature was nearly the size of a horse. Dark hide covered its body like layered armor. Long curved tusks jutted from its jaw. Positions! Selene shouted. Thalon and Doggin stepped forward instantly, shields raised. The boar charged. Its tusks slammed against Thalon's shield with explosive force. He staggered but held his ground. Now! Kyle and Kesh struck together. Their spears drove into the boar's shoulder. The creature screamed in rage. A second boar crashed through the brush. Then a third. Three, Rethan shouted. Soren darted forward, striking one of the animals across the flank with his spear before leaping back. The boar turned toward him immediately. Fast, he shouted. Celine moved in low, her blade flashing across the animal's leg. The boar stumbled. Enkidu, she shouted. Without thinking, he stepped forward. His spear thrust hard into the creature's side. The bronze tip drove deep. The boar collapsed heavily. Behind him, Mira shouted, More! A fourth boar burst from the brush, charging directly toward Liara. Before it reached her, Dagan stepped across the path. His hammer swung downward with crushing force. The weapon struck the animal's skull. The boar dropped instantly. The last remaining animal spun wildly, trying to escape. Kyle chased it with a laugh. Oh, no you don't! His spear struck cleanly through its shoulder. Kesh finished it with a second thrust. Silence slowly returned. The group stood still, catching their breath. Cal wiped sweat from his forehead. Okay, he said with satisfaction. That was better. Celine nodded. Much better. Nova studied the fallen boars. These creatures appear significantly more dangerous than the wolves. Enkidu nodded. Agreed. Celine glanced over again. Agreed with who? Enkidu blinked. Myself. Kyle burst out laughing. He's arguing with himself now. I am not. You definitely are. Liara checked the group again. No injuries. Just bruises, Thalon said. Doggin rolled his shoulder. I've had worse. Nova drifted closer to Enkidu. Your combat effectiveness has improved. Thanks. Celine looked at him again. For what? Enkidu rubbed his face. Thinking. Celine stared at him for a moment, then shook her head. You are a very strange person. Cal clapped Enkidu on the shoulder. But he can fight. That helps. Soren returned from the tree line. Area's clear. Rathan nodded. No more tracks nearby. Celine pointed deeper into the forest. Then we keep moving. Enkidu looked ahead. The trees grew darker in that direction. Thicker. Older. He tightened his grip on the spear. Nova hovered beside him. This forest contains many more dangers. Yeah, Enkidu said quietly. I'm starting to notice. Celine turned back briefly. You coming? Enkidu nodded. Yeah. Together, the 10 young hunters moved deeper into Death's forest, unaware that the ancient runic pillars hidden within the forest had begun to stir for the first time in centuries. The group finally stopped beside a small stream that cut through the forest floor like a silver thread. Clear water rushed over smooth stones, the sound soft and steady. Celine raised a hand. Break. No one argued. Spears were planted in the ground. Shields leaned against trees. Boots splashed through the shallow water as several of the children knelt to drink. Kale collapsed onto a fallen log with a satisfied grunt. That was a good hunt. Kesh dropped beside him. You say that every time we fight something. That's because it's always a good hunt. Liara knelt beside the stream, rinsing dirt from her hands. You enjoy danger far too much. Kyle grinned. Danger makes life interesting. Mira sat nearby, watching the water flow between the rocks. Everything is alive out here, she said quietly. Enkidu lowered himself onto a flat stone beside the stream. His muscles were beginning to ache now that the fighting had stopped. Nova hovered near his shoulder, studying the others carefully. They appear comfortable with these conditions. Yeah, Enkidu murmured. They've been doing this longer than I have. Celine glanced over. What was that? Enkidu blinked. Thinking. Kyle laughed. You do that a lot. Nova folded her tiny arms. Your companions continue to believe you are mentally unstable. I'm aware. Rethan crouched near the stream, sharpening the edge of his spear against a smooth stone. After a moment, he looked up. You talk to yours out loud. The clearing went quiet. Enkidu looked at him. My what? Rethan tapped the side of his head. The voice. Several of the others nodded. Enkidu stared. You hear one too? Kyle snorted. Of course we do. Celine leaned back against a tree. You didn't know? Nova tilted her head. This information is new. Enkidu blinked slowly. Everyone? Liara smiled. Everyone. Mira raised a hand cheerfully. Mine talks a lot. Kyle groaned. Mine never shuts up. Kesh laughed. That's because you argue with it constantly. It starts the arguments. Celine smirked. You start the arguments. Kale crossed his arms. It's not my fault, mine is stubborn. Soren sat quietly on a rock nearby. Some are louder than others. Rethan nodded. Some are quieter. Dagon leaned on his hammer. Mine mostly watches. Thalon shrugged. Same. Enkidu looked around at them all. So everyone has a voice in their head. Celine nodded. We've had them as long as we can remember. Kyle pointed at him. You're the only one talking to yours out loud. Laughter rippled through the group. Nova turned slowly toward Enkidu. They appear to possess internal communication methods. Enkidu stared at her. You mean, like thinking? Yes. Oh. Celine watched him carefully. You just figured that out? Maybe. Kyle laughed so hard he nearly fell off the log. This is amazing. Mira leaned closer to Enkidu. What does yours sound like? Nova straightened slightly. I am interested in this answer. Enkidu rubbed the back of his neck. Different. Celine tilted her head. How? Nova floated higher slightly. I am curious as well. Enkidu sighed. She asks a lot of questions. Kyle grinned. Oh, that explains everything. Kesh nodded. Definitely. Celine crossed her arms. Mine mostly gives advice. Liara smiled. Mine warns me about danger. Mira said softly. Mine helps me feel when things are hurting. Soren spoke quietly. Mine watches the wind. Rethan added, Mine notices movement. Dagon shrugged. Mine tells me when to stand my ground. Thalon nodded. Same. Cal rolled his eyes. Mine tells me to hit things harder. Kesh laughed. That explains you perfectly. Enkidu looked down at the water rushing past the stones. So everyone has one. Nova studied the group silently. This appears to be correct. Celine pushed herself to her feet. Breaks over. The others stood, grabbing their weapons again. Kyle stretched his shoulders. Round two. Enkidu stood as well, lifting his spear. Nova floated beside him. These individuals possess similar internal intelligences? Looks like it. She studied them carefully. But they are not the same. Enkidu glanced at her. What do you mean? Nova looked thoughtful. I do not know yet. Celine looked back toward the darker forest ahead. Come on. The 10 young hunters stepped away from the stream, deeper into Death's forest, none of them realizing yet that the voices in their minds were not separate beings at all, but fragments of something far older. Watching, learning, waiting. Celine pushed away from the tree and lifted her spear. Break's over. Kale groaned dramatically and rolled off the log. That was barely a break. You sat down, Celine replied. That counts. Kesh grabbed his spear and stretched. He says that every time. And every time I'm right. Liara helped Mira up from the stream bank. Everyone ready? Dagon lifted his hammer onto his shoulder. Let's move before Kyle challenges another tree. Kyle glanced thoughtfully at the nearest oak. I could win. Celine shook her head and started forward. Ahead of them, Soren had already disappeared between the trees, moving silently through the brush. Rethan followed, scanning the ground for signs of movement. The rest of the group fell into formation behind them. Enkidu picked up his spear and stood. His shoulders were beginning to ache from the earlier fights. Nova drifted beside him, studying the others. Your physical fatigue has increased. Enkidu nodded. Yeah, I figured. Celine glanced over. You talking to her again? Yeah. Kyle laughed from behind them. Still doing it out loud, huh? Enkidu shrugged. It helps me think. Kesh grinned. You'll stop eventually. Or you won't, Mira said cheerfully. That works too. Liara smiled. It took me years before I stopped answering mine out loud. Dagon added calmly. Thalen still does sometimes. Thalen frowned. I do not. Cal smirked. You absolutely do. Thalen ignored him. Nova watched the exchange carefully. They appear comfortable with this behavior. Yeah, Enkidu muttered. They grew up with it. Celine looked back again. What did she say? That I'm tired. Kyle laughed. Your voice is smarter than you. That's not helpful. Nova tilted her head. He is correct. Enkidu sighed. Great. The forest grew thicker as they moved deeper into Death's forest. Roots twisted across the ground like old stone walls. The air grew cooler beneath the dense canopy. Rethan suddenly slowed. Soren crouched beside him. They studied the ground quietly. Then Soren raised his hand. The group stopped instantly. Celine stepped forward. What do we have? Rethan brushed leaves aside. Deep claw marks gouged the dirt beneath. Big, he said. Cal grinned. Good. Celine sighed. You say that every time. Because it keeps being true. Nova drifted closer to the marks. Large creature. Heavy body mass. Enkidu nodded slightly. All right. Celine glanced over. All right, what? Just agreeing. Kesh chuckled, still narrating his conversations. Enkidu shrugged. You're just jealous. Kyle laughed. Not even a little. Nova scanned the trees. Movement detected. Enkidu's grip tightened on his spear. Something's coming. Celine's posture shifted instantly. Where? The forest erupted before he could answer. A massive creature burst from the undergrowth. 6 heavy legs. A body covered in jagged bark-like armor. 2 enormous claws snapped forward as it roared. Rootstalker, Soren shouted. Shields, Celine ordered. Thalen and Dagon stepped forward immediately. The creature slammed into their shields with explosive force. Both boys slid backward several steps. Kyle and Kesh attacked at once. Their spears struck the creature's side, but scraped across its bark armor. Too thick, Kyle shouted. Celine darted forward. Leg joints! Her blade flashed low. The strike cut into the softer joint of one of the creature's legs. The root stalker shrieked. Now! Rethan struck the same spot with his spear. Soren followed immediately. The creature staggered. Nova's voice remained calm. Joint structure compromised. Enkidu lunged forward. His spear drove into the wounded leg. Hit the leg, he shouted. Cal reacted instantly. His spear plunged into the opening. Kesh followed with another thrust. The creature stumbled backward. Doggin stepped in and swung his hammer. The impact rocked the monster sideways. Celine leapt forward. Her blade drove into the exposed joint near the creature's neck. The root stalker collapsed with a heavy crash. The forest fell quiet again. Kale exhaled loudly. That was fun. Celine wiped her blade. That was reckless, but fun. Liara checked everyone quickly. No serious injuries. Thelen rolled his shoulders. I'm fine. Dagan nodded. Same. Nova studied the fallen creature. Durability significantly greater than previous organisms. Enkidu nodded. Yeah, that one was tougher. Celine looked over. Your voice say that? Pretty much. Cal laughed. I like his voice. Enkidu smirked. Careful, she might hear you. Mira tilted her head curiously. What's her name? Enkidu paused a moment. Nova. The group reacted with mild interest. Cal nodded approvingly. Good name. Celine glanced toward the darker forest ahead. Break's over. She pointed deeper into Desp Forest. We keep moving. Cal lifted his spear eagerly. Round 3. The 10 young hunters stepped forward together once more, deeper into Desp Forest, and somewhere far beyond the trees. An ancient runic pillar stirred faintly, responding to something it had not sensed in centuries. Celine led the group deeper into Desp Forest. The trees here were older, their trunks thick and twisted. Heavy roots broke through the soil like stone ridges. Soren and Rathan moved ahead as usual, scanning the ground and branches. The rest followed in a loose formation. Enkidu shifted his grip on the spear as they walked. Nova drifted beside him. Your body is adapting to the physical strain. Good, Enkidu murmured. Celine glanced back. She coaching you again? Something like that. Kyle laughed. Your voice give combat tips too? Sometimes. Nice. Mine mostly complains. Nova tilted her head. Complaining would be inefficient. Enkidu smirked faintly. Try telling him that. Ahead of them, Soren suddenly slowed. Rethan crouched beside him. They studied the ground briefly. Celine stepped forward. What do we have? Climber, Rathan said quietly. He pointed to the bark of a nearby tree. Fresh gouges cut deep into the trunk. Soren nodded. Probably a tree stalker. Cal's grin returned immediately. Perfect. Celine rolled her eyes. You say that every time. Because it keeps being true. Nova examined the marks on the bark. Claw structure designed for rapid climbing. Enkidu nodded slightly. Climber. Celine glanced at him. You agreeing with your voice again? Just confirming. Before anyone could say more, a screech split the air. A lean creature dropped from the branches above. Hooked claws, long limbs. Dark skin stretched tight over a narrow frame. Tree stalker, Soren shouted. The creature lunged instantly. Thalen stepped forward with his shield just as it struck. The impact rang loudly through the clearing. Kyle and Kesh thrust their spears. But the creature twisted aside and bounded away. Fast, Kale said. The monster sprang toward a nearby trunk. Rethan struck with his spear and knocked it back to the ground. Celine moved to intercept. Don't let it climb! The creature darted sideways again. Spears jabbed. The monster danced around them. Then Mira sighed loudly. Everyone paused just long enough to look at her. You know, she said calmly, this would be easier if you stopped trying to spear something that lives in the trees. Cal blinked. Fair. Mira pointed casually at his belt. You have a sword. Cal looked down, then laughed. Well, that would make sense. Kesh grinned as he drew his own blade. We do default to spears. Thallin chuckled, drawing his short sword. Training habits. Dagan nodded. Spears for distance. Celine smirked. Swords for climbers. Nova watched the exchange. Your companions have adjusted tactics. Finally, Enkidu muttered. Kyle spun his sword once. All right, then. The tree stalker lunged again. But this time, Kale stepped forward instead of back. His blade flashed upward and cut across the creature's chest. The monster shrieked. Kesh struck from the side, driving his sword into its ribs. Celine moved in fast. Her blade slid cleanly into the creature's neck. The tree stalker collapsed. Silence returned again. Cal wiped his blade on the creature's hide. Okay, that was definitely easier. Mira smiled sweetly. You're welcome. Thalen laughed. Next time we'll pretend we thought of it first. Dagan nodded. Obviously. Celine glanced toward Enkidu. What does your voice think? Enkidu shrugged. She says the swords were the correct choice. Nova tilted her head. That statement is accurate. Kyle laughed. I like his voice. Kesh clapped him on the shoulder. Careful, she might start giving you advice too. Kale pointed deeper into the forest. Good. Round 3. Celine sighed. You enjoy this too much. Probably. She shook her head and started forward again. The Lantern 10 followed, spears in hand, swords ready, and each of them a little sharper now than when they entered the forest. The forest grew quieter the deeper they moved. Not peaceful, quiet in the way a room becomes quiet when someone stops breathing. Soren slowed again near the top of a shallow ridge. Rethan crouched beside him, studying the ground. Below them, the forest opened into a wide clearing. Celine stepped up beside the scouts. What do you see? Rethan pointed down the slope. Boars. 3 ironback boars moved through the clearing, tearing up the soil as they searched for roots. Kyle grinned immediately. Perfect. Celine raised a hand. Wait. Soren pointed toward the opposite side of the clearing. 2 tree stalkers clung to the branches above the boars. Watching, Cal's grin widened. Even better. Celine sighed. You say that every time. Enkidu leaned slightly forward to see. Nova hovered beside him, multiple predator territories overlapping. Yeah, Enkidu murmured. Looks messy. Celine glanced at him. Messy how? Just a feeling. Rethan suddenly whispered, More. Something moved beneath the soil near the center of the clearing. The ground bulged, then split apart. A root stalker burst upward from the earth. 6 armored legs slammed into the dirt as the creature roared. The boars screamed in response. The tree stalkers shrieked from above. For a moment, the entire clearing erupted into chaos. Celine stared down at the scene. Well, Kale grinned beside her. Now that is interesting. Nova studied the movement below. Multiple hostile organisms competing for territory. Enkidu nodded slowly. Yeah, that's a lot. Celine looked back at the group. All right, She pointed toward the clearing. We take the ridge and let them thin each other out. Kyle frowned. But fighting them all would be more fun. Celine stared at him. No. Kesh chuckled. She's right. Below them, one of the boars charged the root stalker. The creature slammed the animal aside with a heavy claw. One of the tree stalkers dropped from the branches. It landed directly on the boar's back. The clearing exploded into violence. The Lantern 10 watched in stunned silence. Kyle finally whispered, Okay, that's impressive. Nova studied the battlefield. The root stalker appears to be the dominant organism. Big one in the middle? Enkidu said quietly. Celine nodded. Exactly. Soren scanned the edges of the clearing. They'll scatter soon. Rethan pointed. Already happening! One of the boars collapsed. The remaining animals began circling each other. Celine lifted her spear. When the root stalker moves toward the ridge, she looked back at the group. We finish it. Kale grinned. Now we're talking. Moments later, the root stalker turned, straight toward the ridge. Celine's voice cut through the air. Now! The Lantern 10 charged down the slope together. The root stalker roared as they approached. Shields! Celine shouted. Thalon and Dagan stepped forward. The creature slammed into them with crushing force. Both boys held the line. Legs! Celine called. Kyle and Kesh darted forward. Their swords struck the creature's joints in quick succession. Rathan and Soren attacked from the flanks with their spears. The monster staggered. One of the remaining tree stalkers leapt toward the group. Mira shouted, Left! Enkidu turned instantly. The creature lunged for Liara, but Enkidu intercepted it. His spear struck the monster mid-leap and drove it into the dirt. Kale finished it with a clean sword strike. Nice catch, he shouted. Nova observed calmly. Your reaction speed improved. Working on it, Enkidu muttered. Celine glanced back briefly. Talking later. She lunged forward again. Her blade cut deep into the root stalker's wounded leg. Now! Dagon's hammer crashed into the creature's side. The monster staggered sideways. Thalon shoved forward with his shield. Enkidu! Enkidu reacted instantly. Right side open, he shouted. Kyle and Kesh moved immediately. Their blades struck the exposed joint. The root stalker screamed. Soren drove his spear deep into the creature's neck. Celine followed with a final strike. The monster collapsed. The clearing fell silent again. Breathing hard, the Lantern 10 stood over the fallen creature. Kyle wiped sweat from his forehead. Okay. That was the best one yet. Celine caught her breath. That was reckless, but effective. Liara checked everyone quickly. No serious injuries. Thalon leaned on his shield. That was a lot. Dagon nodded. Worth it. Nova studied the clearing carefully. Your group demonstrated improved coordination. Enkidu nodded. Yeah. Celine glanced at him. She approve? Apparently. Kyle laughed. I like his voice. Mira smiled. She seems nice. Enkidu smirked. She's judging all of you. Nova tilted her head. Accurate. Kale pointed toward the forest. All right. Who's ready for round 4? Celine shook her head. We're heading back. Groans echoed immediately. You survived the outer forest, she said. That's enough for today. The Lantern 10 gathered their weapons again. Behind them, the clearing slowly returned to silence. And far beneath the roots of Death's forest, an ancient runic pillar pulsed once more. The clearing slowly settled into silence. Leaves drifted down from the disturbed branches above. The Lantern 10 stood catching their breath among the fallen creatures. Kyle stretched his shoulders and grinned. Okay, he said. That one counts. Celine wiped her blade clean. That one definitely counts. Liara moved through the group, checking for injuries. Everyone all right? Thalen nodded. Just tired. Doggin leaned on his hammer. That root stalker hit hard. Mira was about to speak when she suddenly froze. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh! Kyle looked over. What? Mira blinked a few times. Did anyone else just... Celine held up a hand. Wait. Several of the others were suddenly standing very still. Soren looked mildly surprised. Rethan tilted his head slightly. Dagon frowned in concentration. Kale's grin slowly widened. Oh, that's nice. Enkidu felt it a moment later. A strange warmth spread through his chest. Nova's voice followed calmly. Level advancement detected. Enkidu blinked. What? Celine exhaled slowly. Level 2. Kyle laughed loudly. I like level 2. Kesh nodded. That fight did it. Liara smiled. Same here. Mira bounced slightly on her feet. I feel stronger. Thalen rolled his shoulders. Definitely stronger. Doggin flexed his grip on the hammer. Better balance too. Nova continued calmly. Your physical efficiency has increased. Enkidu looked at his hands. Yeah, I can feel that. Celine glanced at him. Your voice confirm it? Apparently. Cal pointed at him. What did it say? That I'm level 2. Kyle grinned. Same. Kesh laughed. Everyone? Soren nodded. Yes. Rethan shrugged. Looks like it. Mira raised both hands excitedly. We all leveled. Celine smirked. Good. She pointed back toward the ridge. That means we survived the outer forest properly. Kyle stretched again. Worth it. Nova studied the clearing quietly. Your group has demonstrated measurable improvement. Enkidu nodded. Feels like it. Celine looked around at the group. All right. She pointed toward the path back toward Nuridu. Training's done for today? Kyle groaned dramatically. Aw. Celine raised an eyebrow. You want to fight another root stalker? Tomorrow. The group laughed. Weapons were lifted again. The Lantern 10 began climbing back toward the ridge. Behind them, the clearing slowly returned to silence. And somewhere deep beneath Death's forest, an ancient runic pillar pulsed faintly once more, as if recognizing something that had not walked these woods in centuries. The sun had begun to sink behind the western ridge when the Lantern 10 finally started the long walk back toward Nuridu. Golden light filtered through the upper branches of Death's forest, turning the leaves into shifting patterns of amber and shadow. The forest no longer felt hostile, just tired, much like the children walking through it. Cal stretched his arms as they climbed back up the ridge. Level 2 on the first real hunt. He grinned. Good day. Celine rolled her eyes. You say that every day. Because every day is good. Kesh chuckled beside him. You'll say that the day a boar throws you into a tree. Cal considered that. Still a good story. Liara laughed softly. Mira walked beside her, humming quietly to herself as she watched the forest floor. Enkidu followed near the middle of the group, spear resting across his shoulder. Nova drifted beside him, studying the others carefully. Your companions demonstrate strong behavioral differences. Yeah, Enkidu murmured. I noticed. Celine glanced back. You talking to her again? Yeah. Kyle grinned. You should introduce us properly. Enkidu smirked. She says you're loud. Nova tilted her head. That is accurate. Kyle laughed. I like her already. They continued along the forest path as the trees gradually thinned. After a moment, Celine slowed slightly so she walked beside Enkidu. You've only met most of us during fights today, she said. Probably worth fixing that. That would help, Enkidu admitted. Celine pointed ahead to the tall boy walking beside the scouts. That's Soren. Soren glanced back briefly. Dark hair, sharp eyes, quiet posture. He sees things before the rest of us do, Celine continued. Tracks, movement, trouble. Soren gave a small nod. Someone has to. Beside him, Rethan snorted softly. Celine pointed to him next. That's Rathan. Rathan carried his spear loosely across his back. He's better at reading the forest than anyone I know. Rathan shrugged. The ground tells stories. Nova watched them both. These two demonstrate observational specialization. Scouts, Enkidu murmured. Celine nodded approvingly. Exactly. Ahead of them, Kale was loudly describing his heroic Root Stalker battle to Kesh. Celine sighed. That one's Kale. Hard to miss. Kyle turned slightly. I heard that. You were meant to, Celine replied. He's strong, she added quietly to Enkidu. Sometimes stronger than his thinking. Kesh laughed beside him. And I'm Kesh. He gave Enkidu an easy grin. Someone has to make sure he doesn't get eaten. Cal pointed at him. Lies. Truth. Behind them, Thalin walked calmly with his shield slung across his back. Celine gestured toward him. Thalin holds the line. Thalin gave Enkidu a quiet nod. Someone has to stand in front. Beside him, Dagan rested his hammer on one shoulder. Celine smirked. And Dagan makes sure whatever hits that line regrets it. Dagan grinned. Simple job. Liara and Mira walked together just ahead. Celine pointed toward them. Liara keeps us alive. Liara smiled warmly when she heard her name. Try not to get hurt, and I won't have to. Mira spun around as she walked backward for a moment. And I help. Celine raised an eyebrow. You do more than help. Mira grinned. I know. Nova observed the group quietly. This unit demonstrates complementary combat roles. Yeah, Enkidu said softly. They do. Celine studied him for a moment. You handled yourself well today. Mostly luck. Mostly instinct. She looked ahead toward the fading light beyond the trees. That matters. The forest thinned further as they approached the edge of Des Forest. Soon the familiar green fields of Nuridu Valley spread out before them. The Lantern River glowed silver in the evening sun. Smoke curled upward from the village hearths. Kale stretched again. Home. Celine smiled faintly. Training day 1. Enkidu looked out across the valley. Something about the place felt strangely familiar. Nova drifted beside him quietly. This location appears significant. Feels that way, he murmured. At the edge of the village path, a tall figure waited. The Magus stood beside the old stone lantern that marked the forest boundary. Hands folded behind his back, watching. The Lantern 10 approached. He studied them carefully. Then his eyes settled briefly on Enkidu. Just for a moment, something unreadable crossed his expression. Then he nodded once. Well, the Magus said calmly, it appears none of you died. Kyle grinned. Give us time. Celine sighed. Please don't encourage him. The Magus's gaze returned briefly to Enkidu, and though none of the children noticed, the old man's eyes held a quiet spark of recognition, as if he had seen something today that he had been waiting a very long time to see. The Lantern Ten walked past him toward the village lights. Behind them, the shadows of Des Forest grew long, and far beneath its ancient roots, the runic pillars continued to stir, waiting,